everybody in the whole world. My name is Diogenes, and I want to start a conversation. Now on YouTube, this more often than not involves someone, in this case me, bold enough to think he has some worthwhile, unique perspective on things. And you, the grumpy viewer, probably tired of masturbating, eager enough to tell me what an idiot I am by furiously mining for quotes and checking your logic charts to see which fallacy you want to accuse me of making. Nonetheless, I want to offer my perspective on the big issues. Why are we here? Is that question even important? Is there an objective morality? When the hell is Avatar 2 coming out? So without further ado, I'd like to jump right in with a big distinction, and I mean ginormous. I have a sense that our inability to see this distinction has been the catalyst for most of our problems. War, racism, subjugation of women, poverty, the debt ceiling, the fiscal cliff, genocide, and Kanye West. This distinction is between the creative process on the one hand and the narrative on the other. Let me illustrate. Remember the Big Bang? You know that little thing out of which came all energy, matter, space and time itself? Well, that exploded. A bit of time goes by, and a tiny piece of stardust began orbiting this puny star. And sometime on that special planet, lightning hit a particular combination of life-forming chemicals, and a single cell started doing the mamba. Thus beginning the Darwinian process of evolution. A bit of time goes by, and here we are tinkering with our iPhones, riding our transportation machines, and watching YouTube videos. Of course, there's another story that involves a couple in a garden with a snake who convinces Eve to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. She, being the intellectually superior one perhaps, gave it to Adam because that pussy-whipped moron did anything she said. One bite, crunch, and they suddenly realized they had no clothes on. So they covered themselves up with skimpy fig leaf bikinis until the gap opened up and they could buy themselves some khakis. Now notice, what I gave you are two different narratives. The narratives were an attempt, a mere representation of what the creative process actually is. They were just stories, grossly oversimplified, but like a signpost pointing to something that exists apart from the signpost itself. Now, I imagine this tendency to weave narratives is a byproduct of our highly sophisticated mechanism for recognizing patterns. Physically, we would be quite helpless face to face with many other life forms. Don't believe me? Go up to a rhinoceros and punch him in the face. Since we can't compete with nature physically, we create methods and technologies to create a buffer between ourselves and the actual world of lions and tigers and bears, oh my. We can wear armor, wield spears, swords, guns, armies, and the man-made borders they protect. Narratives are perhaps a psychological outgrowth of this buffer zone. Before we engage with our experience, we have a tendency to sort it out, confine it to labels, separate things into categories, and then cautiously engage with it. We do this because we are afraid, and we cling to these narratives because we see them to be necessary in safeguarding our fragile lives. The problem is that the narratives themselves, being our own limited view of things, start to pose as truth. I'll give you an example of some condensed narratives that have wreaked havoc at some point in our history. The divine right of kings. The gods need human blood. Little girls should be seen and not heard. Homosexuals are an abomination. I'm such a fucking loser. The list goes on and on. There are success narratives, victim narratives, rags to riches narratives, rags to riches back to rags narratives, religious, secular, ethnocentric, egocentric narratives. All of them pose as truth. Not a one of them is. Insofar as people cling to these narratives as the truth, is the extent to which they can wreak havoc on our ecological family. Stories are never free. There's a cost to all we cling to. And before we mess things up, don't you think we ought to have faith enough to let go of belief. The creative process, on the other hand, is just happening. It's hard to define or talk about because to do so would be to tack a narrative on a non-narrative and thus cheapen it. Notice your breathing. Notice all we take for granted and the profound mechanism by which our body takes in oxygen and gives it to our blood, which courses through your veins by the faithful pounding of your heart. Now what you notice is different from the narrative I just placed on it. It came close. It pointed to it somewhat poetically, but was not quite it. Once we notice something, that something which was happening naturally now becomes something with a story. And these stories can be manipulated, leveraged towards some self-serving end. The creative process is integrated and whole, unbound by our preconceptions. It is just what's happening outside of our stories. It is the life, John Lennon said, is happening when one is busy making other plans. So herein lies a curious paradox. In order to relate to experience, we invent words and create models and representations. We create narratives. In creating those narratives, we cannot fully relate with the breadth of the creative process. That is, not without the skimpy cover of our fig leaf bikinis.
They've been trying to preach me, trying not to swallow, but the rhymes make it easy